Things I thought I knew. 1, I was truly in love with the woman I'd met in Florida. 2, I wanted to be with this person. 3, I'd gone through a very difficult personal trauma with work. 4, I always felt I came behind my children in the eyes of my wife. 5, love can be very selfish, and to prove that point, the last 4 items all began with the word I. I was incredibly selfish. My actions were without preempting. There was no indication this was simmering and about to boil over. It just hit with force and devastation. My wife at the time told my 2 kids, and it was just 2 weeks before my son's high school graduation. I was told not to attend the ceremony. My immediate family was firmly convinced I had caught the midnight nonstop on the Nutbag Express to Crazy Junction and was often lost in my Mindville with the rest of the world on permanent hold. I moved into a condominium in North Carolina with the woman I met in Florida. I felt like I was finally with someone who not only understood how I felt, but felt the same things and cared for me and about making things better. Simultaneously, my older brother, unbeknownst to me, had tried to arrange to have the police come to physically remove me from the condominium in North Carolina to get me to a hospital for immediate psychiatric evaluation. Although I was completely unaware the family was trying to come up with some type of an intervention to bring me back to Maine and to some semblance of reality, it was a phone call from my sister that penetrated the wall of solitude and slapped me around with the short, sweet, harsh reality of what I'd done and how I'd done it. In a very brief phone call, she said, "You completely abandoned your wife and 2 children without any explanation, warning, or any conversation, and gave no indication of your intention or location to anyone." She continued by explaining not only was that irrational and completely unfair to those people, but it was cause for everyone to be concerned about my emotional stability. She strongly suggested I consider coming home immediately to face the effects of the damage my actions had caused, and to consider with urgency seeking professional psychological counseling. Without too much paraphrasing, I think the general idea was, "Hey, you crazy fuck, you just walked out on your wife and kids without so much as a goodbye, and here's why, and disappeared to somewhere in North Carolina with a person you met 6 months ago. Are you on crack? If you are, that would at least be some form of an explanation. Get your ass home and face the shitstorm you created, you cowardly chicken fucker. All I want to hear from your sorry ass is yes, and I booked a flight." I booked the flight. It was a very hard trip back. I felt guilty leaving North Carolina, and moreover, I felt like I was wearing one of those oversized sumo wrestling suits, only mine was a steel wrecking ball. Everywhere I turned and went to hug someone, I created complete and total devastation. I felt horrible about what I had done to my wife and children, and even as bad for going to North Carolina with the person I'd fallen in love with only to leave her there. Back in Maine, I arranged to speak with my 2 kids, and as you imagine, it didn't go well. I told them what I'd done, that I'd been dishonest, had been unfaithful, and had left them without any warning or chance to discuss anything with me. I told them that I loved them and I would always hold them as the most important people in my life. The meeting only lasted about 30 minutes, and when I left, I felt the full weight of my actions. Driving away, I kept seeing the hollow expression on the kids' faces and the cold, hard expression my wife wore during my visit. My folks let me stay in the basement of the house over the next couple of months. It was summer, and my wife and 2 children went to the island home for the rest of the season while I lived in the basement of my folks' house. I wanted to try to fix things, to turn back the clock and realize the whole thing was just a dream and I was actually going to get the family unit back together. None of that was possible. The morning of the 4th of July, I woke up and went upstairs to do some ironing, something I had until that point found almost therapeutic. As I was ironing some shirts, everything hit me at once. I was losing everything. Running had always helped me clear my head and quiet the voices, but when I was in North Carolina, I was running up and down hills. Doing the downhill running, I aggravated an already worn and damaged joint to the extent I could barely walk. My marriage, my business, and my body were all falling apart at the same time. So one minute, I was upright and ironing, and when my mom found me after smelling something burning, I was curled up on the floor of her laundry room in the fetal position. I'd left an iron on the shirt, and it was burning but not on fire. I was crying and convulsing, and she kept asking me what was wrong. She called for my dad. I asked her to call my older brother. I told him I wasn't sure if I was going to make it another day. He flew to Maine the next day. We found a therapist. I was put on antidepressants right away, began therapy, and arranged to see my wife to see if we could do some joint sessions. We did 3. The first one, I confessed everything again. The second one, she stated her side of the story, including the irreparable damage I had done to her trust, and that she could never forgive me for what I had done and how I made her feel. She was angry that I could have ever considered myself nothing more than a paycheck, and said that both she and the kids felt abandoned and betrayed. The third and final session, she said she never wanted to be with me again. That was it. I continued therapy for every week for almost 3 years. At the end of my sessions, I was clear that what I had wanted in the relationship and what she had wanted were not the same thing. She wanted security and stability. I wanted deep love and passion. In the end, she got everything we owned voluntarily in the divorce. There were days I either couldn't get out of the shower or out of bed. Every day I felt a sense of loss and tremendous guilt over what I'd done and how much pain I'd inflicted. The flip-flopping, as my therapist termed it, was clearly driven by guilt and the amount of time I'd been with my ex-wife, along with the love and incredible connection I felt with the woman from Florida. Every time I left one side to work on the other, I caused more pain and damage and felt like I was more than likely the worst person on this or any other planet that supported life forms of any kind. I began to consider suicide again. My parents were worried. My siblings were worried. My therapist was worried. But I managed to rally on through. Every time I'd come home to Portland, I'd be faced with my father's deep disappointment in my actions, his loss of his relationship with my children because of my actions, the ending of an almost 26-year relationship with my ex-wife, and the irreparable damage I felt I'd done to my daughter and my son. I'd left Maine twice and North Carolina 3 times, each time with the grace and sensitivity of a fucking wrecking ball, leaving piles of smoking rubble in each place each time. But my last time leaving North Carolina, I changed my cell phone number. I was convinced I wouldn't contact the woman from Florida again. It was all wrong, but the love and real emotion I felt was so real and so pure, I thought. I had a really tough time letting go. I was sure I wasn't going to go back to what was. I was certain I was going to live in my parents' basement for a 3rd time. So I aggressively looked for a place to live. I found a really wonderful converted Victorian in a great little neighborhood in downtown in the Old Port in Portland. I spent every day by myself. I was by this time very well acquainted with depression and what it felt like, and was bound and determined not to succumb to its bony, clammy grasp, so I wrote or walked or tried to run, but my hip was now completely shot. I practiced breathing. Not the usual day-to-day breathing, but the meditative kind, although there were days, honestly, I didn't care if I drew a breath or not. I was truly alone, but not lonely. Big difference. I looked to the future and asked myself deep questions. I lived in the present. When I walked, I was aware I was walking and not just going through the motions. I cooked, I cleaned, I ironed, I did laundry. I wrote, thought, and for the very first time connected completely with the present moment. I was okay. As I approached my turning 50, it was a very significant milestone for me. For it was the first time in my life, my body, which had carried me through 27 full marathons, finally needed a replacement part. It was just about the time that this blessed event of my 50th birthday took place that my left hip decided it no longer wished to participate in the Forward Progress Parade and turned in its resignation. No written apology or tearful goodbye, it just stopped showing up for work. And so as I approached my 50th birthday, I did my very best Festus impression. I was in the 3rd and final year of an employment contract I'd signed with the investors that bought the window company. It wasn't bad enough I no longer owned what I built, but they had hired a CEO, a COO, and a VP of sales, which means I now reported to 3 people. At that point, the heart and passion I once had for the business had been unceremoniously and officially extinguished. So recapping, my marriage was gone, my kids were gone, my business was gone, my hip was gone, my girlfriend was gone. All of the weight of all of these events came crashing down on me in a long ride home one evening in April.